Hi, it's Dr. Steve from Misericordia University. In today's online class, let's consider the student-centered method of rotational learning. One question that teachers try to address is how can you reach every student every day? Sometimes students appear more engaged in classroom activities than they actually are. Some of them kind of learn to play the so-called game of school. Well, if you want to address this question, one way is to, once in a while, try rotational learning. Rotational learning is a good way to reach every student every day because the centers or stations that you create allow more one-on-one time with students. That allows you to, as a teacher, better connect with individual students. And it certainly provides more hands-on engagement with content and allows small groups to interact together in each of these stations. So what exactly is rotational learning? Rotational learning capitalizes on a pedagogy that has been used in early childhood for a long time, and that is the pedagogy of centers. And increasingly, rotational learning is making its way into secondary education. In rotational learning, a teacher creates several centers or stations, and students in small groups cycle through these centers during a class period. Best practice suggests creating about 3 centers for a class period. And teachers create centers such as a direct instruction, a small group lecture center, an independent center, a collaborative center, and even an innovation center. So what are some of the benefits of implementing rotational learning? Well, number one, it certainly addresses the concept of student attention span, and which is ideal if you're teaching in a block schedule situation. It also utilizes different modalities of learning, and this allows a teacher to address different learning styles of students. When using rotational learning, it makes it easy for a teacher to differentiate material for different students in the different centers. Rotational learning can be used for remediation purposes, can be used for drill and practice of some content. It can also provide enrichment, and it can be very motivational to students, and it's definitely a change up in traditional styles of teaching and learning. Because of the great capacity for rotational learning to address different learning styles of students, maybe you would want to do a learning style inventory in advance with your students to ensure that the different stations that you're creating will match up with different learning styles of your class. I'm providing you with 2 links on Blackboard. One is a 20-question learning style questionnaire, and that's by educationplanner.org. And the second one is a learning style inventory that's provided by the Georgia Department of Education. If you utilize rotational learning in your class, one type of center that you might want to incorporate is a direct instruction center. In this center, you'll be doing traditional lecture to students, just that it will be a micro lecture. And think about it, this allows you much more time to work with students one-on-one and address their questions. And students, many of them will be much more likely to ask questions of the teacher when they have maybe about 9 students or so, like about 1/3 of the class in that group who's experiencing that lecture at that time. And also, for the lower learners in your class, this provides the opportunity to support their success in other stations. You can make sure that this is the first group to go through this direct center, and that way you can support their success in other centers as well. A second type of station that you might want to utilize is a collaboration center. In a collaboration center, you would have students work together in some way to learn some concept. This helps students build skills in cooperating and communicating, and in today's world, this communication and cooperation with other people is a very important life skill. A collaboration center supports project-based learning, albeit on a small scale, a very small project. It certainly supports cooperative learning groups, and it also supports what NEA calls the 4 C's of learning. The 4 C's of learning refer to 21st century skills that all citizens will need to acquire: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and also creativity. There's a wide variety of activities that you could incorporate into a collaboration center. One idea is you could create a rubric and ask students to self-critique and also critique each other on something. Normally, students, we find in these activities, are very, very honest, so this normally turns out to be a very valuable activity for them. If you're using rotational learning over time and students re-enter the collaboration center from time to time, you can have a project going. So, for example, one teacher had students start their own coffee business, and they designed the paperwork, they designed the business plan, and then they sold and delivered coffee. Another example of a longer-term rotational learning collaboration center activity would be you could have teams of students create flipped videos to support the flipped classroom. Students would use video to teach back different topics to fellow students. They could incorporate the use of different technological tools. For example, they could create script in Google Slides or Google Docs, and then they could create videos with a product like Screencast-O-Matic. As students create these videos, first of all, they'll be very engaged, and likely a lot of the videos will turn out to be very valuable teaching and learning resources. You could then use some of these videos as resources in an independent station in future rotational learning. And this works because students really enjoy functioning as a teacher or mentor to other students, and students tend to hear information presented by other students in a different way than if a teacher presents it. It's another voice teaching them, and many times that voice can really speak to them. Another type of center that many teachers utilize when they're doing rotational learning in their classes is an independent center. In an independent center, there's a wide variety of things you could do there, but mainly you're going to have students work individually on some type of activity. So this could be an activity where they are rehearsing material, they're reviewing content, they could be doing a whole bunch of different things. Again, this is another activity where the teacher can very easily differentiate learning for individual students by changing up the materials and the activities that students will perform in the independent center. A couple of ideas would be utilizing some type of diagnostic program if your school uses Study Island or similar product, or video learning, which you could incorporate through Edpuzzle or Play Posit, such that students will watch the video and every so often the video will pause and prompt them to answer a question or two. How can students connect your content with the real world? What can they do in the real world using your content? This could be the subject of another type of center used in rotational learning, and it's called an innovation center. In this type of center, have students develop solutions to some open-ended problem. Let them see that they can use your content and possibly other content areas too to help address problems help them see practical application of your content. An example of how innovative rotational learning is and how it's starting to make its way more and more into secondary education is the Hazleton Academy of Sciences. The Hazleton Academy of Sciences is a STEM magnet school. It's located in our local Hazleton area school district. The building, which is an old office building that's been repurposed for use in this school district, offers a blend of traditional learning along with high-tech learning in STEM areas. The Hazleton Academy utilizes rotational learning as a model for its entire school, and it's set up in this way. They have a traditional classroom environment as the center of learning, and physically it's centered in the middle of the building. Then on the outskirts of the center, there are different areas or centers. Separated by a folding partition is a laboratory classroom. They also have small group instruction rooms that provide open collaborative spaces so that students can participate in individualized learning. They also provide a Genius bar there with integrated technology. It would be like a technology learning station. And because of the way this is set up in this school, one teacher can actually supervise all of these spaces from the classroom at the same time. So today we considered a newer student-centered method of teaching and learning, which is more and more being utilized in secondary education, called rotational learning. To better process this information, let's hold a brief discussion online in which we brainstorm some ideas of how you could implement rotational learning in a practical way. Now, given most teachers are going to incorporate a direct instruction station where they're going to lecture a small group. So we know that that's going to be in place. But let's brainstorm some activities that you could use in some of the following stations. In your content area, what could you do, have students do in an independent center? What could you have them do in a collaborative center? What could you have students do in an innovation center? Again, these thoughts are to prompt our discussion. Realize that in your particular individual postings, you do not have to deal with all three of these. But as a class, as a whole, hopefully we will be able to cover a little bit of each of these areas. I hope you enjoyed today's online class. I look forward to seeing you at our next meeting.